Hello, I hope you're all doing well. I'm Kat, founder of Movement for Modern Life, and today I wanted to talk to David Kam. David is one of our guest teachers, and I would like to talk to him tonight about the East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month, because I think it's a really important thing to talk about. Oh, I can see that David is around. Let's see if we can go live with. Has he accepted? Yay! There you are, David.
Hi,
Hi.
it's been a while. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really good. I sort of crashed into tonight, but I think we all crash into our lives, don't we?
Totally.
It's so good to
Um,
see you. How have you been?
Likewise. I've been really well actually, and September is always a really meaningful month because of East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month. So it's been quite busy, but
Good.
yeah, busy in the best way. Just being able to listen to many stories that are similar to my own in many different mediums. So all in all, good.
Oh, how nice. How nice. And I wanted to dig in a little bit into East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month.
Mm.
So it's the third one. So tell me a little bit about it, because I know that you're quite closely connected
Mm.
with what's going on. So what sort of things, events, tell me a little bit about why and what, a little bit of the background.
Of course, yes. So as you've said, it's in Southeast Asian Heritage Month. In short, Easy Heritage Month has been running for 3 years now. And when it first started, it was very much sparked by the height of Stop Asian Hate, during the pandemic times when
Wow.
Asian faces are overly represented to be associated with the virus itself. And with that, six women actually banded together to just advocate for fair representation, for Asian
Yeah,
faces and the East and Southeast
yeah.
Asian community. And so from all of these, advocacy work with the government, we then sort of formed a non-profit that looks into fair, easy representation across different mediums and
Yeah.
platforms, and then it grew into a platform that provides resources and opportunities for people to connect. And so that same year, we just kind of had an idea, of creating a container where we
Yeah.
can really dedicate time and space to acknowledge the contributions of EC people towards the UK. So EC Excellence, and EC Pride, EC Eats, like these are all of the different hashtags and ideas of how we can really acknowledge the specific contributions that we've offered to the country. And we decided that September would be, a lovely month to celebrate it because it's sandwiched between South Asian Heritage Month and also Black History Month. The
Mm.
reason why we wanted to create EC Heritage Month specifically is because it's to carve out a specific place for UK or like for now UK based East and Southeast Asian stories, because
Yeah.
we obviously know about API Heritage Month
Mm.
across the pond in the US and Canada, and sometimes those stories can take kind of can sort of be assumed to be stories that are similar to
Yeah.
ours when we have our own nuances
Right.
as well. So, well, here we are, and in 3 years coming now, we are more than 100 events strong, and these events are events that span from, walking tours of
Mm.
Chinatown, both old and new Chinatown, exhibitions, a lot of really meaningful panels. I recently attended a panel that's attended by people in the 60s, and just hearing their journey of having migrated here to now.
Mm.
We've also had talks specifically on sustainability, because the theme of this year's Heritage Month is roots and roots. So
Mm.
we've had that as well, but from an easy lens. And also a few mindfulness well-being sessions too, which is why yeah, I think it's such a lovely month in a way to not just celebrate, but
Mm.
to make accessible our culture so that those who are
Yes.
not easy identifying can also come in and kind of learn a little bit more about what we grew up with and what we're interested in.
I think it's so cool, and we're getting so many hearts. I think this is really resonating with so many people, David, because it's just that traditional thing of many people are ignorant.
Mm,
And people, I get the feeling that there are many people as well who are curious and who want to know, and everybody sort of knows about difference, but it's how to approach difference, which people can get unstuck with, because it's like, yes, equality, but yes, different,
mm,
and different upbringings and different ways of being. And that is, I mean, it's something that I've personally always been passionate about, is finding out about difference and just finding out about curiosity, just being curious about how different people are living and assimilating. So would you mind sharing a little bit of your story, David?
yeah.
Would that be something that you wouldn't mind
Of
sharing?
course, and before that, I just really want to reiterate how much I appreciate you sharing about curiosity, because if anything, I like to lead with the benefit of the doubt that people do care, but there's only an extent of care that's possible if you only know a certain culture from a distance.
Yes.
And the whole point of AC Heritage Month is to offer as many open doors as possible
Yeah.
for us to humanize the experience. Like if I were to know an easy person I could call a friend,
Yes.
then a lot more empathy can then be established. And when we talk about easy mattress, then you could think about, oh yeah, that friend, I care for that friend.
Yeah.
So I can then, kind of look into this. So with me sharing my story, I guess. I hope that this is also another bridge towards empathy, towards the Easy community.
Yeah.
So I moved to the UK about 13 years now, and it's a very common thing for Malaysians to move to the West for further education.
Mm-hmm.
So once you're done with your O levels equivalent of education, you would then move into looking at universities in the UK or the US or Australia. Those are the main
Mm.
three places. And I just ended up choosing the UK because it's kind of one of the furthest places. And I don't know, I just kind of like jumped straight into it. And ironically, the first place I was in is in Brighton, which is obviously, the queer capital. And at that point, I hadn't even come up to myself. So I think UK as a whole has been a massive journey of self-exploration. What I hadn't quite anticipated was how jarring this this experience of migration is, because I think as a young boy it was very much like, oh yeah, it's a new environment, let's just like go,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But we just I think it hadn't really occurred to me how yeah, how complicated that whole thing is, because you immediately just uproot yourself, and my entire family till this day is back in Malaysia, which means I have to just completely establish my own support system within the UK. And this is when it's so important to be able to see people who are like me, or to just be with people who come from a similar cultural upbringing, just so there's a similar a sense of familiarity
Yeah.
that makes me feel like I'm still kind of at home, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's like I'm propagating in some ways, and I'm just kind of being placed in this whole other pot,
Yeah.
and it takes time for this propagation to take root.
Mm.
And it's that process essentially. And yeah, I think in the last decade or so, there have been beautiful moments of bonding with not just people who are from Malaysia, but just people who are from the East and Southeast Asian community. But there are also moments of feeling like I don't want to be a part of that community, from the
Right.
complexities of being queer. And
Right.
in Malaysia, queerness is still something that's illegal. So then there's
Wow.
some, yeah, like it's quite bad. So then
Mm.
there has been a little bit of an identity crisis in the
Yeah.
sense where at one point I didn't even want to associate myself with Malaysia because
Yeah.
it brings up
Of
hurt
course.
of like, oh, my country doesn't accept me. So
Yes.
then I think in essence, I could go on and on, but then with anyone who, migrates from one place to another, there's so many things that are like of a push and pull
Hmm.
relationship. There are many things that I've loved about having moved to the
Yeah.
UK, but there are also many things that I've dearly missed being from Malaysia. And I think negotiating
Mm.
this relationship is very complicated in itself, which is why got into movement in the first place.
Really?
Yeah, and I think with this easy community, it's just really lovely because at times when I'm not home and I seek home, there is this familiar place or familiar group of people that just understand
Mm.
what I'm going through
Yeah.
in the same way, like it's different, right? When you speak to someone who also identifies as queer,
Mhm.
like that's that level of being able to be with, at that level of
Absolutely.
understanding that makes you feel just a lot safer
Yes,
from by default.
absolutely.
Mm.
I absolutely hear and understand that
Yeah.
one. And it's, as you say, it's complex because there are interweaving layers of identity.
Mm.
And what I like here is the not black and
Yeah.
whiteness about this issue and about your feelings, the delving into that complexity.
Mm.
And I think that often we as a culture, we sort of look for a simple answer and we look for that, yes, this is now perfect and we're all fine.
Mhm.
But actually, humans are incredibly complicated.
Mm.
And there are also so many divergent experiences. And it's interesting to hear that your body, the somatic work, is the thing, is maybe being more of a common thread, threading your feelings. Am I putting words into it? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the point of displacement, which is,
Mm.
the number one thing, if I were to bring it to one word, what migration feels like, it is displacement, right? Like you are displaced from what feels familiar from you.
Mm.
And we've talked so much within the wellness world, within body-centered practices, that it's about returning to presence. And how do you do that when home is ruptured in some
Yeah.
way? And it's not bad, but when we talk about home, the body is the most immediate sense of home that you
Yeah.
could get. And when actual home is something that I can't access, this is what I return to. And so with these mindfulness practices, it's been so helpful to be able to just encourage the returning towards my body, to make sense of this jarring experience of, wow, like I'm no longer home, I'm somewhere away.
Yeah.
How can I find a way of safety within myself,
Yeah.
so that I'm not overly dependent on others? And there's still
Mm-hmm.
value in having a support system
Mm-hmm.
around you, but there's also a very inherent value in making sure that you're able to stand as an island of your own.
Yes.
And yeah, and I think with this idea of coming back to the body is also about being able to sit with complications. Like we can't articulate complications with just words, and sometimes things are maybe even too complex
Yeah.
to write down or to draw out. And I think that's what I love about arts and movement as expression, because you just move, you move through it. You quite literally just allow postures or movements or stances to help you process feelings without any need to have to justify what you're feeling, or even any need to clarify what you're
Yeah.
feeling.
Right. Yeah, right. And there's no need to intellectualize if you can access that feeling of being at home in the body.
Mm.
And I have the feeling when I practice with you, David, that you're a person who's spent a deal of time getting to know your body and movement. And it's something which feels maybe quite easy. Is that, and this might be a terrible thing to say, but is that a cultural thing or is that a David Kam thing?
Um, I think inevitably it's both, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially from where I come in terms of, my artistic aspiration. Like, yeah, like movement is always a way of expression for me. So when I share movement practices, it I definitely see more as a creative practice than necessarily like an imparting of a certain
Yeah.
knowledge. It's
Yeah.
more like a way of enabling. And for me to be able to share that as authentically as I can be, I have to draw from my own inspiration, which then obviously links to the way I've been brought up. And
Yes.
I think in Malaysia, it's just such a cultural melting pot that, you have all these different languages that you're surrounded by at all
Right.
times, food, in different ways of preparation at all times. And that's what has quite drastically shaped the way I think about movement and the way I propose movement to others. So in short, when I offer classes, I tend to say that they're like a buffet.
Yeah, I like that.
And I just offer you options, and you can decide, how much of it you'd like to take, or how much of it you prefer to leave. And so, yeah, I would say, in what you notice, maybe it is very much just kind of who I've become based on where I came from.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I love the thought that your movement is as much as a melting pot as Malaysia might be for other people, cultures. So this is now just my own curiosity. What groups of people migrate to Asia, to Malaysia, to make it a melting pot in that way?
Yeah, we have three main races, which is Malay individuals, Chinese individuals, and Indian individuals. So
Okay.
we make up the three like biggest like proportion of the
Mm,
country. But then outside of that, we do have a lot of expats and also like kind of like the aborigines equivalent of Malaysia, and we have probably about like 24 different makeups of people and communities. And so even with our schools, we have like obviously private schools, but we also have vernacular schools where you have Chinese schools, Malay schools, and Indian schools, and they would all have different sort of like language requirements in some sense.
yeah,
So on a given day, if I were to walk down the street, I just have to play a guessing game of what I converse in.
that's
I may
great.
start in English, for example, and if I sense like a slight kind of like if they're not understanding, maybe then I will share like something like maybe Cantonese and Chinese. Yeah, and as Raymond said, that the indigenous, which I was mentioning, like the aboriginal in other countries, the indigenous from East Malaysia. So we have a lot,
A
and
lot.
I think that
How
makes it really
fascinating.
rich. Yeah,
Do you think this it makes the culture more tolerant?
I
The
think
general
so.
culture in Malaysia, if you can classify.
Yeah, yeah, I think I wouldn't even say more tolerant, but because this is a default of
Right.
when we grew up, like this is what we're surrounded by. um at least for me, I can only speak from my experience. I feel like um I've just understood that there are always variations. There are always variations in whatever it is that we output, from food to language to like frames of mind and to all of that. But at the same time, because we are run by a Muslim government,
Right.
it does mean that there are certain restrictions, but um, that's not necessarily what the public
Right.
um, the public's outview might be.
Right.
So then again, we have to see from an institutional
Yeah.
level to a sort of societal level, the perspectives are different. But from an everyday sort of like, if I walk around Malaysia, everyone is generally really tolerant and super understanding. And I think this is also why I've only just realized that Malaysia is probably one of the easiest place to travel to,
Right.
because like yeah, I think the locals get to meet tourists at so many different languages
Yeah.
that it's easy to be able to ask for directions and around. Like if you have to not resort to technology, like it really is one of the easiest places. And again, like food palette, right? Like there's so many
Mm.
choices that it's just one of the easy places to visit.
That's so
Mm,
nice. That's such a wonderful thing to hear.
mm,
What I'm hearing as well from this conversation is um, it's more of an acknowledgement that it's not a sort of them and us. It's more, yeah, us. We're all that.
mhm.
It's all me too.
Yeah,
It's everybody is me.
yeah.
And maybe that also is part of yoga as well, is the interconnectedness, the
Mm,
recognizing that you hurt if I hurt you, I'm actually hurting me.
mm,
And that sort of, I think, feeds into maybe that same type of philosophy as I can see it.
mm.
So it's a wonderful way of being brought up, and it must be quite jarring
I
because
mean,
there are some
yeah.
wonderful and tolerant parts, of course, of British society, and there are also some deeply embedded superiorities and better thanness and them and us, and colonialism has of course had
Mm,
such a devastating impact on the psyche of the
mm,
nation, I'd say. But anyway, that's just my little rant. What I wanted to ask is how can people become allies?
mm. I think this is a big part of my personal movement
Mm,
practice for a long time now. It's been, showing up to the mat and doing your thing so that you can be the best version of yourself as you go out to the world.
yeah,
And more, especially, since the pandemic is about, yeah, how do you go beyond the mat and like take this into actual action. And there's been lots of fantastic advocacy work happening right now already, but specifically right now, the one tangible thing that I could share with
mm-hmm,
everyone is um, understanding how to be an active bystander.
yeah,
And what I mean by that is if you witness people around you experiencing
right.
microaggressions or identity-based violence of any form, how is it that you can intervene in
Mm,
a way that's also safe to you? And with that said, Be Seen, which is the nonprofit organization that I'm volunteering at, we are running some public active bystander trainings, and this
wow.
is a 3-hour session. We have online dates. We also have in-person dates. The in-person ones I'm facilitating myself,
Yeah.
and it's 3 hours of sitting together and really understanding the many different ways we can intervene and help diffuse a situation. And the way we do this will be through very active scenario-based discussions, scenarios that will cover situations within the workplace,
Mm-hmm.
in the public
Yeah.
transport, in the online
Yeah.
space, as well as in other kind of environments, like what if it happened with your friend,
Yes.
like if these things, because I think with microaggressions and with the struggles, especially with EC communities and what we face, they're not the most clear cut um, crime, if
Right.
that makes sense. It's not like a really black and white thing where you could say, oh, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Some definitely, but thankfully not too
Yeah.
many. But what happens very frequently are the passing comments.
Oh, really.
The things that are just like caught, just said in a passing,
Yeah.
and then what could you do, and how could you help, spot that and call people in. So these trainings, have been very valuable. We've been delivering them for the past year now, and it's a really nice segue from those of us who have been practicing movement, a
Mm.
lot, and trying to figure out, like, yeah, how do I bring it to the next step. Try coming into these sessions. I think of it as the equivalent of an arm balance workshop, because if anything, an arm balance workshop or inversions is a practice of courage.
Yes.
This is that, like, if not more
Yeah.
so. It's like, how can you practice courage to like come into the
Mm.
space to fully understand when there are situations like this, whether or not you are someone who's more inclined to a flight person or a fight person,
Yeah.
how can you still be able to support?
Yeah. That's that's a really, really beautiful sounding training. I'd love for
Mm.
you to maybe share a link when I put this video, when it goes up on the grid. I'd love for you to put a link there because that sounds really, really amazing because it's something which I know that I struggle with
Mm.
as well. Like by nature, I'm a bit of an appeaser. I don't like conflict.
Yeah.
I don't want to, say the wrong thing. So I sometimes find myself not, I'm like, what the fuck? Do you not? Like,
Yeah.
and when I do that, I then feel layers of guilt and shame and like ridiculous stuff. And it's like, it's a very ridiculous and complicated sort of self torture
Mm.
that we kind of go through. And I think to have some easy mechanisms,
Mm.
I would love that. I would really personally love that. Because also, I think the thing that it does is it makes a person stand in their own power.
Mm-hmm.
Because a person who sort of practices maybe knows a little bit of who they are and what their intention is in the world and who they want to be in the world. And when they find that they're hearing another voice coming out or they're seeing something which is different from their intention,
Mm-hmm.
that's a really very deeply jarring thing. So to have those tools, God, oh, I wish people were taught that at school. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have been delivering these trainings in schools. So if you know of any schools, like anyone tuning in as well, we are offering free trainings to institutions and any communities within the UK. So if you're
Oh, that's
interested,
amazing.
we can actually organize these private sessions.
I'd,
And I
I'd
have to,
absolutely love that. And I think if for anybody listening, because I'm child free, so that's I'm not deeply in that world, but there are so many folks who I'm sure feel the same way. It's like,
mm,
let's we need to, like, just that feeling of how empowered, how much more you'd trust yourself, how much happier you'd be able to feel in the world being your authentic self,
mm,
letting other people being their authentic self and knowing that that's great.
mm. And yeah, I really want to, emphasize that I felt exactly like you. Like this is definitely not a training that I've like come up with myself or like,
Right.
that I've like figured it out. It really has been a collective of people coming together to sit together to listen to actual incidents that's happened in our community
Yeah.
and creating scenarios loosely based on that. And because of that, when I've done the training myself, I really went from, a place of guilt, like
Yeah.
yourself, I don't know what to do when I'm in these situations because I sometimes have the fear of if I were to intervene, maybe I'll be the next target, right?
Absolutely.
And it's a really valid fear. And so with that, hopefully, this training will be one where we can understand and also acknowledge that these fears are absolutely normal and there are ways to still be able to quite practically help from a distance, or if you are someone who's like fight oriented, what you can consider
Yeah.
before you intervene so that
Yeah.
it's still safe for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think many people come out of it feeling a little bit more confident in being able to trust themselves
Yeah.
and knowing that if something is off, they can actually do something about it,
Mm.
and that
I
they
love that. And in so
yeah,
and that ricochets in so many areas of life as well.
100%.
And all the bigotry, prejudice, intolerance, and things which are just not right and okay
Mm.
that we might sort of let get away with because we're worried at being the ones to,
Yeah.
worried for our safety or worried for the ones, just that feeling of worry about how to deal with it. So, yeah, that feeling of confidence. David, you're doing really amazing work. I'm really yeah, I'm really honored that you've just spoken to me about this. I'm honored to be able to share this platform and to share what you're doing because it's so important and that you're giving up so much of your time for this. So
No, I'm really grateful for you to be able to just initiate this conversation because if anything, we've chatted about earlier, I just really hope to be able to open as many doors and as many bridges for people to get to know different communities and different perspectives, and also branch out of movement. People within this platform, we are all, I love the MFML community because everyone's so friendly and they're so movement invested. And this is, a seed that I hope to plant. Like, how can we bring movement towards action outside of this,
Yes, and I feel very, very similar about it. That sort of there's no point doing the practices and making the shapes if off the mat we aren't that same person. Like the whole point is to be the person who goes off in their life in a wholesome way.
Absolutely.
So thank you, David. I really, really appreciate your time and your thoughts. If anybody's got any other questions or thoughts, I'm going to put this on the grid, so and it'll go on to our community movers group. And if you wouldn't mind keeping a little eye, because people might have questions as things come up. And I think it's so lovely to be able to just have people have a safe space as well, to be able to ask questions which seem silly or wrong. And I think that, again, going that theme of curiosity, there's no right or wrong as long as we're open-hearted and we're all of us sort of going with a good intention. That's my experience anyway. Yeah.
And I understand as well, if we need a degree of safety when it comes to asking these questions. So if you don't feel like you want to put a comment on, you can absolutely also DM me and ask things in private. I'd be more than happy to respond in the best way I could. But regardless, I just appreciate you all for tuning in and just spending a bit of time to listen and to be curious. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much, David. Really take good care and best of luck with the rest of all of your work with East and Southeast Asian Heritage Month and ongoing. It sounds just amazing, and I'd definitely like to get a bit more involved with that.
Amazing. I'll share you all the links.
Please do. Please do. All right, you take care. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.